Hi guys, in just a second, I'm going to be introducing Rebecca Rosenberg, and we're going to be talking about her debut novel, The Secret Life of Mrs. London. And I can't wait because it is such a good book. I don't know how much you know about Jack London, but he wrote the book, The Call of the Wild, and it's an early 1900s. I think that book was released like in 1903. But this book is told from the point of view of his wife, I don't even know how you say it, Charmian. I'm going to ask her because that's what I was guessing. That's what I heard in my head when I was reading it. But anyway, I can't wait. Like I said, debut novel. I love debut novels, and this one is amazing. So here is Rebecca. Hi everyone. Today I am so excited to be speaking with a debut author. Her novel is called The Secret Life of Mrs. London and her name is Rebecca Rosenberg. Thank you so much, Rebecca. She's going to
Hi, Mel.
hold
Hi,
up the
sister, everybody.
yes. She's going to hold up the book so we can see the cover because look at what she's got on. She's got on the hat.
I had to wear my hat for the occasion.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cool cover. I love it. Love
I
it.
love it too. It's really fantastic. It's made me change my whole wardrobe, though. I now have to be Mrs. London.
It's not a bad thing, because
Yeah.
that style is like always just so cool to me. I love vintage fashion, and I watch a lot of documentaries and be like, I want to dress like that. That's what I want to look like. I want to because it was
That,
just so
that was
dressy.
one reason I love this cover. I really had a couple of choices with it, but this is more the flapper era, which is at the end of this book. And I thought that that was more appropriate than a Victorian image because the protagonist, as we'll get
Yes.
into, is very forward thinking. So she's more like a flapper than she is a Victorian. So I do love it.
Yeah, I love the red lipstick on her too. Like not just the because isn't that how they really I mean their lips were red, right? I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely. I mean, a flapper
yeah.
is amazing. Very, very out there and very confident with her looks compared to the Victorians who wore no makeup at all, very understated. So it's a lot of fun.
It was one thing that I read in your book, and I don't give away spoilers, but there's not a lot. When it's historical fiction, there's not a lot of spoilers. But the one thing that you brought up, and I found very interesting because I do a lot of documentaries of this time period because it interests me, is that you mentioned false eyelashes, and I was like, did they really have false
They
eyelashes?
really did. You want to know an amazing thing? When anyone wonders if anything in my book was accurate to the time, just put those fears away because I had five editors go through this with
Wow.
a fine tooth comb and make me prove every single word, every single instance, every single place, every single relationship and name. It was like, oh my goodness.
And I
So,
thought
yeah,
that. I mean, it wasn't like I doubted you. It
no,
was one of those
I get
things
it.
that stunned me because, first of all, we know what we wear in makeup, and I always think, did they have that? Like, did they have glue that they were like putting these false
Yes,
eyelashes
they
on
did.
with?
Plus, Bess, you're talking about Bess
I
Houdini
am.
who's wearing them. And
Yes.
Bess Houdini was a showgirl.
Yeah.
She was in Coney Island when Harry Houdini met her doing a song and dance act. And so she did wear false eyelashes.
Yeah.
But I think Charmian London would have done that because she was more educated and refined and a working woman and more bohemian. So she would not have been wearing the false
False
eyelashes.
eyelashes.
And she's pretty shocked when she
She
sees
sees them.
this
Yes.
falling off of her eye. It's a
Yeah.
pretty funny scene.
It really is. And, so let's just talk about who Mrs. London is because when I first saw your book, and I was like, Mrs. London, who's Mrs. London? So I started, I went on Amazon. I don't like to read a lot, but I did read a little bit, and I was like, oh, Jack London. Okay. And all right. like I said, I'm starting to get into this time period, but I really didn't know a lot about him. And I think that you picked such great characters that everybody's going to say that. They're going to be like, oh, how much do I know about him and his personal life and the fact that he was friends with Harry Houdini, like, and then when you placed it, everything that I loved is that you placed this time period. So much was going on, and it's 100 years ago. I mean, just a little, more than 100 years ago. And for some reason, people are getting to be so fascinated with this time period. And,
Well, I think that something that is astounding, because some people don't know who Jack London is Jack London was the most famous author of art of his time between 1900 and about 1918. He was in every newspaper. His books were first serialized in the newspapers. They were in every magazine in serials. He did 50 novels in 20 years. He wrote 50 popular novels. And his books were made into movies. And so they were in every theater as well. And he was so famous and so popular that they would show him before the movie and speaking and telling what the story was going to be about. And he was a handsome devil, just a very handsome guy, looks kind of like John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
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 So, and Charmian, you asked first who Charmian London was. So what's amazing is you've got the most famous author of the time, and you have the most famous magician that ever lived in our history.
Right.
And he was known worldwide. Houdini had traveled all through Europe. He had performed for the Tsar of Russia. He had performed for the German Chancellor. And he had transformed himself from a vaudeville magician who did card tricks to being the greatest escape artist of our time and just mesmerizing people all over the world. So when these two men met, it was cataclysmic, and they just adored each other. And then how does it happen that both of them fall in love with Charmian Kittredge London? And she was a very different woman for her time. She was just coming out of the Victorian era, and yet she was a very modern woman. She had educated herself through college. She was a working woman. She was a writer and a typist. Even in those days, the typists were men. And yet Charmian had put herself through school and typed 100 words a minute. And so when she got hold of the young Jack London at 20 years old, and she was the first one to review his first story that he ever sold, she said, "This boy has promise." And I say boy because she was about 5.5 years older than he was. And she just saw a genius in the making. And so she became his right hand, she was mentoring Jack London. And it was a wonderful partnership. They married 5 years later, and it was just history. They worked so productively together that he was able to write his 20 best-selling novels, highest paid novelist of the time.
Yeah, and I love how you opened the book up with her, like, getting him up. Like, it's like, okay, we have to get him up, and in order to keep him motivated, like, it's like she had this little routine on how to get Jack up and motivated to write, and I just thought it was so cute.
He was a wild man. He would drink 24/7 and smoke constantly. He was just smoking and drinking and carousing. And in some ways, she thought that was good for his creativity. And then she had to get him up in the morning. And so one way they did that, do you remember what they did?
Yeah.
So they a boxing match. And they boxed all the time. Now, I wish I could have seen that. I would have loved to have a picture, but there is no picture. I have searched for a picture, but they had boxing matches together. And he was very into boxing, and so was Harry Houdini. So there were a lot of interesting coincidences between the two men. I can see why they hit it off and why they were such great friends. And I can also see why Harry Houdini fell in love with Charmian London based on his marriage with Bess.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, we're not going to talk about the ending, but I
Yeah,
loved the ending.
there
I
was
just
lots of spoilers. A lot of spoilers in this book.
yeah, and I don't like to do spoilers because this book was like I love the journey of it because, like I said, I didn't know these two men. I didn't know a lot about them. And of course, we do know, as I'm reading, because you keep it really real to life, some of Houdini's tricks or like you bring that up, and so those like I'm like, oh, I remember hearing about that, but you don't get to really. I never read anything about him. I didn't really know him as how you portrayed him, and I was like, this is such a cool book about people that we don't. And I know you say at the end that there's a lot of fiction because you had to put in what you thought how they could be. There's a lot of stuff that you had to because we don't know, but I felt like there was a lot of, the dates are aren't the dates fairly accurate for Houdini, right?
I think that it's 95% factual.
Yeah, I felt like that
I feel
too.
like it's 95% factual. I really worked with things that happened in history.
Yes.
But we don't know exactly what they said. I do know about a lot of what they said because Charmian London wrote a diary for her whole life. And so when you hear the voice of Charmian London in this book, it's really coming from her diaries and also this is a biography
Look at
of
that.
Jack London that Charmian wrote.
I did not see that picture. I was looking up pictures, but I did not see that one.
This is a really quintessential picture of them. And it actually is taken the day before Jack London dies, this picture.
Wow.
And it was taken for his movies. It was a publicity picture, and it's a beautiful picture of him. Both of them are in their riding togs, and they have their little dog Possum. That's yes. Possum yes. in the book. And they ride their horses every day. So this is a very romantic, wonderful picture taken the day before he died.
So he didn't look like, sick the day before he died. Like, it wasn't like he...
He's a handsome dude.
Yeah, like he didn't look like... I imagined him like...
He would, yeah.
That he looked a little sicker, but he doesn't. Like, he's not frail looking. He's not,
No, he's not. If anything, compared to younger pictures of him, he's a little bloated in the face, which is what happened. We're not going to give away.
I know. I'm like trying not to talk about it because I really do want you to read.
But anyway, this book, she wrote 2 volumes this size. That's a big book. Yes. She wrote 2 volumes about their life. So it's really an autobiography of their lives. And Charmian, some people have said, why did I portray her the way I did in her thoughtful manner and everything? Because she expresses herself through this book and really talks about her worries and how difficult it was to work with Jack and to make these things happen. And she was like his coach, and his guide and his mentor and his muse. And she was everything rolled up into one. And it was just pure exhausting, even though she adored him.
Yeah.
So she's a complicated lady because she's so talented and so fierce in a way and so magnificent. We haven't really talked about her personality, but she was, I said she's educated. She owned her own home. She was a writer. She was an editor. She was a horsewoman, a master horsewoman. She was a swimmer, champion swimmer. She danced, she sang, she painted. So she was this beautiful, magnificent woman that he wrote about in many, many of his novels. He wrote about her, especially in Valley of the Moon and Martin Eden. And he actually wrote about a love triangle, which is what this is about. He wrote about it many times, like at least 3 times that I can think of. He wrote about love triangles. And that's what I was alluding to in the book, that he was kind of testing her out and trying different things so he could understand what a love triangle could be, and how people would feel. I thought that was very mischievous of him, but
Yeah.
I have proof that he did that.
I'm sure you did. And I
Yeah.
do love, like, I've been through 2 marriages. I have 6 children. And so what I loved about her is how vulnerable you made her. Because it wasn't like it was easy. It wasn't like she was out to like hurt people. What really, she struggled with her fidelity, I want to say, and exactly, like, she did feel like he was testing her, and she was like, don't test me, please don't like, she didn't want to be tested on that, and I really, I love that about her. I love how you made her very vulnerable in her sexuality, even though she was a very sexual person for that time, and she talked about it.
She was a sexual person. She was her aunt. Get this, I do have it in the book, but she was raised by a triad, by her aunt and 2 uncles that lived together.
Yeah.
She was raised in this crazy bohemian way, and yet she was totally head over heels with Jack. But then he is testing her throughout, and does not stay, I want to say, loyal to the marriage. So I think it's an interesting question. If your spouse is not being loyal, what does that mean for your fidelity?
Yeah.
And she has to struggle with that throughout, because she's faced with that time and time again. She finds letters. She knows of women that he meets in New York and from the past, and he continues to meet with them, and she questions him. And so what's a girl to do?
Yeah, and I love he always had such good answers when she would confront him, that as a woman I was like, really? Yeah, that's the answer. Like, really? Oh, I don't want to be rude, and I don't want to not, answer them or, cut them off for any good reason.
I know. He kept all of his love letters under his bed, and she's saying, why are you still corresponding with these women? But she had proof that he was seeing women.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Well, he would disappear sometimes, and and then just come back, and be, So I think he
would disappear and come back.
Yeah.
There are stories like that. Like he would just be gone. In fact, they were in New York one time. I didn't really put this in the book, I don't think. They were in New York one time, and he just disappears for a few days and comes back with a beautiful fur coat for her.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So what percentage did you love Jack, and what percentage did you hate Jack?
I'd have to say that I probably loved him more than hated him, because he was vulnerable too. I think you made him, it's like, I wanted to not like him as a woman, but then he would do something, well, first of all, he was in a lot of pain. He suffered. He was a brilliant writer, so I did feel like he's like one of those guys where you're like, I'm sure that if I would have met him, I would have been like very, attracted, like, whoa, look at him. Like, so it's like, I wanted to hate him, but then I couldn't, like you would say, there would be a point and you'd say something and then I'd be like, oh, Jack. So it's, I really was sympathetic to him. I mean, I don't think that I hated him that much. Like I said, sometimes his lines and I'd be like, really, like that's what you come up with. But, or he, when she'd be sick and he would come back after days, and then he would have some lame excuse as to where he was. But as a whole, I think that the talent of him and, who he was, it was just like, you can kind of see why she loved him the way she did. And, I got it. It wasn't like I was thinking, what are you doing with this jerk? I didn't think that way. I was like, she got him. She got it. She knew he was brilliant. She accepted some of the other things. She struggled. He struggled. And you know what? They stayed married. And like I said, I've been through 2 divorces. I give them credit for that. But what made you so, so much that you wanted to write a book? Like, what about them did you love that you were like, I'm going to write a book about them and introduce them to the world?
Well, I have a lavender farm in Sonoma Valley,
which is so cool.
Yeah, thank you. And Sonoma Valley is the Valley of the Moon, that Jack London named it that, and he had his beauty ranch right there. So for 30 years, I have been hiking through that ranch with my kids, horseback riding, seeing his beautiful cottage, their beautiful cottage, seeing the house that she built for herself after he died. And now it's a museum and it's wonderful. So you can visit this property, their 1,000-acre ranch. It's called
Wow.
Jack London Park. And you can see the Wolf House, the ruins of Wolf House. You can see the ponds. Everything that I wrote about, you can see there. The beautiful gardens, the Shire horses. They collected gorgeous Shire horses from England. They have the Shire horse barns. They've got the wineries. They've got the pig palace that he built for his pigs,
Yes.
which is funny. So I mean, they were bigger, bigger than life. Who just take this trip around the world that they did. Here they got married, and the very next year after they got married, they built a 43-foot boat called the Snark, and they sailed to Hawaii and on through Fiji and Tahiti and the Samoan Islands, and there were cannibals. This is 1906 or 1910. And so who does that?
I
They
know.
knew nothing about sailing. They had a crew of 4 that knew nothing about sailing. Jack had to learn it on the fly, like how to navigate. Do you think you and I would hop in any boat and take off for Hawaii right now?
No.
They did that, and they thought they were going to be gone for 7 years, but they actually they thought they were getting leprosy because they had visited the leper island on Molokai, and their skin was getting great big blisters and horrible rashes and everything. So by the time they got to Australia, the doctor said, "You're not going any further in the sun. You have to go home." And they found out that it was just severe sun poisoning. But they were just amazing, amazing adventurers. So they inspire me. And when you go to the museum at the Jack London Park, you can see all their pictures of the natives and everything. Jack London and Charmian were great photographers. So they took beautiful photographs in 1910, from the 1900s to 1920, of all their world travels. They're inspiring, very
Yeah.
inspiring.
I do love how you put quotes of his books in the beginning of each chapter because I really wasn't that familiar with him as a writer, and I was just blown away by his writing. It's so beautiful, and
It's so beautiful.
yeah,
It's
his
beautiful.
phrasing, it was just, I don't know, even that little bit that you would put, I was like, wow, now I get like what she saw, in his writing because you know she was typing it a lot of the time, so she knew like what how much of a genius that he was. And for that time period, like you said, I think what I loved about it is that he was, because I had done some research on him for this, and I was like, yeah, he was like what I always like Gatsby would kind of, but that's in New York, but in San Francisco, like that larger than life person at the
Yeah,
turn of the century that, had parties, and,
yeah.
like that's what I pictured. It's like I have
They always
parties.
had 20 to 100 people at the ranch that
Yeah.
they were entertaining, but more in a ranchy rather than the
Yeah.
Gatsby
Right.
style.
That's
They
on the
they
East
would
Coast.
have them hunting and fishing and hiking
Yes.
and riding horses and all of that, doing horseshoes, but at night there would be plenty of wine and he drank martinis all the time, so plenty of martinis and till all hours of the night. But they always got up in the morning and wrote their 1,000 words, and by noon they were back at the party scene again.
Yeah, and that's what I
Very
was gonna say. It's like it was like the opposite. It's like the West Coast Gatsby, where they're, instead of just standing around looking beautiful, they were like doing things. They were outside, and I don't know,
Yeah.
it just seemed crazy for that time period. They're like, so come on over and we'll ride some horses and do some
Well,
shooting.
when they got married, they bought the ranch, and it was like 120 acres in the beginning, and they kept adding on to the ranch till it was 1,000 acres. And their house that they were building, the Wolf House, was 25,000 square feet, 25 rooms, a separate wing for her and for him, a 30-foot reflecting pool, just every modern convenience of electricity and hot
Yeah,
running water. And
right. That was
so
another thing that was
they were
like,
just truly amazing people and writing all the time. And Charmian wrote 3 of her own
yep,
books besides many articles.
yeah,
Very inspiring people.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
so excited to expose them to a bigger audience now so they don't forget who they were.
right. I'm inspired by you. I mean, this is a debut novel. It's amazing. Like you said, the research that went into it, I learned so much about that time period, which I love when I'm open up in historical fiction. Like, I want to learn. I want to read a great story, but then I want to be there in that time period. And I felt like, just like I said, just about the fake eyelashes, anything, the electricity, so much was happening at that time period that we're learning, I should say I'm learning more and more about. And then to get this book and be like, oh, this is so awesome. I learned so much from it. But I went on your website and I want everybody, I'm going to have it linked. And I saw that you do have more books coming out. So like right away.
Well, I may have to change those dates. I don't know.
I'm like,
but
wow.
I wrote a book on lavender. That was my first book. But it's a nonfiction book.
Right.
And it's a beautiful book on the 300 lavender farms in America.
Oh.
And that was a labor of love. So that was my first book. And I have 3 other books that I'm working on now. And the next one will be the Champagne Widows, which is about the widow, Barb Nicole Clicquot. Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot Champagne. Do you know that?
Oh, wow.
The orange label. So she lived in 1800, and her husband died 4 years into the marriage, and she took over and made this tiny winery, a champagne leader of the world. And it was during Napoleon times, so she has to wrestle with Napoleon, wrestle with her father-in-law and her father. I mean, in 1800, you are not allowed to do such things. And only women weren't allowed to do anything. I mean, Napoleon really had them shut down at the time. But there's a little loophole, which I found, and that's very exciting. Widows can do things legally, not wives. When you're a wife, everything you own is owned by the husband.
Right.
If you don't, or if you're not married, then it's owned by your father. But if you're a widow, you can do what you want to do.
Wow.
No one can stop you. So I'm really into that right now, and that's exciting. And then I have a couple of, I have 2 books. My first 2 books that I ever wrote, I'm working on. And they are about the Silver Queen of the United States. And she's a fascinating woman named Baby Doe Tabor, a real woman who mined herself and went from rags to riches to rags again and ended up dying in a silver mine in Colorado.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's fun. It's so thrilling to get into periods of time and to find women especially who really thrived no matter how much it was impossible for them, they still thrived.
Yeah, even this book, that's what I got out of it too, because the last third of the book is talking about her and, how she made it. And that was so inspiring to me because, it wasn't easy for them. It's like, we don't have any excuses. These women, like, they really worked hard to make it, and she was not going to just sit back and not do anything. And I love that part of the book, that she's like really thriving and doing her thing. And, I love that you're bringing these women. I mean, like I said, I'd never heard of her, and I'd never heard of her story, and I'm so happy that I was able to read it. So please tell me when your next book comes out.
Thank you.
I want to be one of the first ones that reads it. So can you show us the cover again? Because I want to show everybody this beautiful, beautiful cover. Look at that. I love it. Love it. I love how she's looking off to the side.
Yeah. I don't know if you can tell, but she has a big fur jacket on. And that comes from a from her diary that when she goes out to New York City to meet with Houdini, that he sees her in the front row of his theater and she's wearing a white fur jacket, and that it's just stunning to him and she looks like an angel. And so I love that she's wearing that jacket.
Yeah, I
I
love
want
that
that.
too. I love it too. Thank you so much, Rebecca. It was so much fun talking to you. Like I said, just you know where to find me, please. I want to read your next one, and this is an amazing debut novel, and I'm sure you're so. I mean, all the reviews are so amazing. I'm sure you're really happy.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Okay. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Guys, wasn't that so much fun? I love Rebecca. Oh my God, is she beautiful or what? And I love the red hat. So, thank you guys. If you made it this far, that means you watched our whole video, and I really appreciate it. I will be putting all of Rebecca's links underneath here. And can you believe that was a debut novel? I mean, she knew her stuff, didn't she? That's awesome. I love talking to historical fiction authors, as you guys can tell. So anyway, please hit like if you enjoyed the video. And if you'd like to be notified of all my videos, please hit subscribe. And thank you for watching. Bye, guys.